What an appropriate song for this band to sing today. We had two family members up here. We had Ella on the right, my right, and her Aunt Sarah sitting next to her. So it was good to hear those voices so much. Yeah. Who's the lady that wrote that song? Casey Musgrave. I like Casey Musgrave, but I'm 68 and can't remember anybody's name. She says it so well. We've often heard what is a normal family, and we all agree there is no normal family. As I have been told, maybe you've heard it too, we talked about it a few weeks ago, that normal is what? The setting on the washing machine. Nothing else is normal. Every family has its quirks. Every family has its unique stories. Some may even call these family members or these family stories weird. But I want us to understand this today. Maybe. Thank you. Thank you. So we don't have it anywhere, do we? I will read it for you. Yeah, old school. I used to have a flip chart up here. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So here's what I want us to understand, that weird families, the ones with the colorful characters and the scandalous past, are not only normal, but they possess a unique power to bring love and justice to the world. That is where we're going today. I asked for a normal family, but I got the deluxe edition of weird. These families fit that definition of weird. Growing up, my best friend's family did not have traditional snacks like fruit roll-ups, Gushers, etc. Never heard of Gushers. They ate sticks of butter. Sticks of butter. Whenever they offered me some, I always told them I wasn't hungry. They had multiple packages of butter in the fridge and freezer. They didn't consume the entire stick. Rather, they would cut off pieces. They weren't poor, they weren't fat, but they were effing crazy. Well, this story gets even more weird. I was babysitting for a girl and noticed furs on her bed. She explained very matter-of-factly that they were her cats. Her parents skinned her cats after they died and put the pelts on their bed. Well, that was the last time I babysat for them. And this story takes us into the world of scary. My great-great-grandmother's husband disappeared without a trace. Spooky music. 30 years later, right after she died, they found leftover pieces of him that were chopped up in the outhouse. He had been abusive, so she took matters into her own hands. I can't help but applaud a little bit. I know I shouldn't, but I can't help that. Yeah. I am shocked, but tell me more. Yeah. Some of us will remember this guy, Cary Grant. Cary Grant said, "Insanity runs in my family. It practically gallops." There was in Cary Grant's family a secret. Archibald Leach was his real name. That was not the secret. But when he was 11 years old, his mother left. Family members told him that she had gone to a seaside resort, and it wasn't clear when or if she would come back. But when her dad built another family, created another family, found another wife, and had kids with them, Cary Grant or Archibald Leach knew Mom was not coming back. At one point, he was told that his mom was dead. He didn't know what to believe, did not know what the truth was. Expressing the impact of this childhood experience, Cary Grant said, a sadness of spirit that affected everything I did. I always felt that my mother rejected me. It was not until he was 30 years old that he had been told that his dad had placed his mom in an institution and had been there ever since. So Cary Grant arranged for her discharge and took care of his mom until she died, although they never really did reconcile with each other. In the 1950s, when Cary Grant was in his 50s, he sought some professional help to cope with the trauma that he had experienced in his childhood. wise man. Interestingly enough, his physician treated him under very precise and cautious care with LSD. And you're reading more and more about how that is being used to help people with trauma in their life. So in our series in which we're talking about families, am I right? We're thinking today about this. The scandalous family tree of Jesus. And in that tree, we're going to find grace in all of our imperfect histories. Matthew 1 is Jesus' Ancestry.com. We call it a genealogy, and it starts off like this. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Not a very compelling way to start a book. When we start reading a genealogy, we just kind of think, well, this is the skippable part. Let's get over this and get to the real story. But this is a genealogy. It's a list of all the names, mostly fathers and sons, kings and average Joes, that trace the lineage of Jesus back to Abraham. But instead of skipping over this Ancestry.com, what if I told you that this genealogy represents one of the most radical and subversive but hope-filled passages that you'll find in Scripture? Because here's the truth. Jesus' family was absolutely weird. His family tree is chaotic. And I couldn't be more grateful for that. Here's one thing that is so interesting about this family tree. In ancient Jewish genealogies, it was all about the men. They traced from father to son, father to son, father to son. Hardly ever was there a woman mentioned in the ancient genealogies. But Matthew breaks this pattern. Not only does he mention 5 women, 4 plus Mary, but he specifically highlights these women: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and the wife of Uriah, who is Bathsheba. And these aren't just any women. These aren't women like Sarah or Rebecca or Rachel that we might have studied when we were in children's class in Sunday school. These are women with complicated and messy stories. They're women who lived on the margins, who broke social norms, and they were outsiders. So I want us to take a quick look at each of these 4 women. We know enough about Mary, but we don't know much about these other women. First of all, there is Tamar. Matthew chapter 1, verses 2 to 3. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. So Tamar leads the invasion of women who broke up this patriarchal list of ancestors. Now, by including Tamar, Matthew was doing something pretty radical. He recalls for the reader a story in which Tamar scandalously impersonates a sex worker, and in so doing exposes the sin of her father-in-law, Judah. That's a big deal, because Judah was a big deal in the Israel's history. Judah is the head of the tribe of Judah, from which the Jewish people took their name, Judah and Jew. So this guy is a big dog in Israel's history. So Matthew's reference to a story that reveals Judah's sin says something important about how Matthew is reading Israel's history. Because Matthew sees the righteousness of the country, of the nation, of the people of Israel, not in the guy who gave his name to the nation, the Jewish people, Judah. Matthew sees the righteousness in the justice that was acquired and that was achieved by a woman who impersonated a sex worker, Tamar. She, through her act, brought justice to herself because she was treated unjustly by Judah, and in so doing, exposed the sin of her father-in-law. Well, the next lady in Matthew's genealogy is Rahab. Matthew goes on, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Now, we read this and we think nothing of it. We don't know the history, but gosh, the people that originally read this account of Jesus' life, man, the bells were going off and the alarms were ringing and the red lights were flashing. Why is Matthew including Tamar? Look what she did to Judah. She got justice for herself, yeah, but my gosh, in so doing, she exposed the horrible sin of this leader. And then he mentions Rahab. Now, Tamar impersonated a sex worker, but Rahab really was a sex worker. And she was a Gentile. So she brought this other into the line of Jesus. She brought a foreign element to the bloodline of Jesus. I wonder if Rahab kind of represents, therefore, the outcast, us, them. I wonder if Matthew is preparing his readers to get ready. You think it's pretty scandalous that Rahab was a part of Jesus' genealogy. Well, you just wait until you find out who Jesus liked to hang out with. All of the outcasts. Well, right on Rahab's tail comes Ruth. Verse 5 of Matthew 1, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Ruth was another non-Jew, and she was a feisty. That's not what the Bible says. That's what I say. She was feisty. So Ruth was from the land of Moab. That was a country that's presently just a little bit in the southern part of good night, nurse, Jordan. And it's on the east side of the Jordan River right now. And she married an immigrant into the land of Moab, and the immigrant was from Judah. And so he went to Judah or to Moab for whatever reason, and he and Ruth got married, but then he died. And so Ruth stayed with her husband's mom, whose name was Naomi. So Naomi, the mother-in-law, and Ruth, the Moabite woman, moved back to Judah. And they went to this field, and it was common in those days for the owner of a field to leave some of the grain around the edges so that people who were not in a good economic position at all could come and gather grain for their food. And so one day Ruth and Naomi were out there gathering grain, and the owner of the field came up to him, and his name was Boaz. So Naomi kind of punched Ruth in the side and said, Ruth, I think you need to make a move on Boaz. This is what Naomi said to Ruth. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. I never read this in Sunday school. Then, Ruth, go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until the morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, no one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor. So what's the deal? She uncovered his feet. Well, it doesn't mean that she uncovered his feet. To uncover the feet was a Hebrew euphemism for uncovering his genitals. That's what Ruth was doing. And you can just imagine maybe what happened after she did that. And after she uncovered his genitals and whatever happened, he proposed to her. And so they were married, and they were the ancestors of King David, the ancestor, obviously, of Jesus. So, quite the story. And did any of y'all hear that in Sunday school? That's what our kids are learning today. Well, we know the story. From that relationship came David. And with David, you think of what woman? Bathsheba, exactly right. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother was Bathsheba, the widow of Uriah. We know, I think most of us do at this stage of our spiritual life, that David did not woo or seduce Bathsheba. But David used his position as king to force her to come to the palace where he forced himself upon her. She had no choice in the matter. He was the king. And since she had no choice in the matter, she could not consent. It was rape, pure and simple. There was no consent. And her inclusion in this genealogy, I think, must have really disturbed the people, the Jewish people. It strikes a major blow at what may have been the dominant version of Israel's history, a version that longed for the glory days of King David and his son Solomon. But Matthew wasn't going to let him clothe. My dad used to say, we clothe the past in a garment it never wore. And Matthew just brought to the surface the fact this was not a good period of Hebrew history. Matthew did not try to erase history, revise history, rewrite history, or sanitize history. Matthew exposed their history of what their king had done. So why would Matthew include this genealogy and women in this genealogy? He could have easily skipped over them. It was the typical way to write a genealogy. But he deliberately highlights them. I don't know why he did it. I know what I feel when I read it. What I feel is that Matthew is showing us that God works through the unexpected, the marginalized. He works through those who have had scandalous past. So in a culture obsessed with ethnic purity, Matthew points out that Jesus had foreigners in his blood. In a society that sidelined women, Matthew highlights women and their role in the life of Jesus. In a religious system that prized moral perfection, doing the right thing, he showcases stories of scandal. Sarah Bessey, a theologian that I love, wrote, the genealogy of Jesus includes the outsiders, the scandalous, the forgotten, reminding us that God's story has always been one of radical conclusion. These bones of these four women would have been bones that we wanted to keep in the closet and keep that closet door locked. But Matthew opened the closet door and let out the bones so everybody could see. He revealed that 3 of these women were of foreign lineage. Jesus was Jewish, but he had Gentile blood flowing through his veins. Henry Louis Gates, the professor of African American research at Harvard, has said there is not a single person on earth who is pure anything. We are all a genetic mixture of various ancestries, something that this fella who is on this video shockingly discovered. Take a look at this clip. Well, just as shocked as this guy was to find out that he was 14% black, Matthew's audience, the readers of this story, were shocked. They were reminded Jesus was not pure Israelite. He had people from all surrounding country. He was a mixture of different races. It's a beautiful picture that Matthew's painted. And all of the discrimination and the racism and the prejudice that seems to emanate from churches, from Christian people, Matthew just wipes away. Said there's no basis for that, in fact, whatsoever. I've been thinking about my own family tree lately. My grandfather, Clarence Wright, was born out of wedlock to Celia Wright and a guy named Jim Klepper, her boyfriend. It was a source of deep shame to my grandpa Wright that his mom and dad were unmarried. It was in those days on the legal documents that a child born to a couple who were not married was actually, and I'm going to use the word because it's so alarming, it's a word that just pounded in my grandpa's mind. It caused him so much shame that he was a bastard. And he never talked to my dad about it, never talked to my dad's brothers or sisters about it. My dad only discovered this family secret when he was in high school, and he found out later that his next door neighbor, well, down this road neighbor, was his actual biological grandfather. Jim Klepper lived next door. At that time, when Dad was in high school, he lived in Rogersville. His dad, my grandpa, was pastor of Harmony Baptist in Rogersville. And this speaks so well of my granddad. He, of course, knew who his real dad was, Jim Klepper. And Jim Klepper was a member of Harmony. And Jim Klepper's brother was Grandpa's minister of music. So every Sunday, my grandpa got up and he would look into the face of his biological dad, the one that brought him so much shame. And he would hear his uncle, by biology, leading people in singing. I don't know if my great-grandmother, Celia Wright, wanted to marry Jim or not, but her parents did not let her marry him. Jim wanted to marry Celia, and her parents wouldn't let her. But you know, if Jim, my biological great-granddad, would have married my great-grandmother, Celia, I would have been Philip Klepper instead of Philip Wright. I often wonder if I'm somewhat related to, Jordan Klepper, one of the guys on The Daily Show. If you look at that picture, I don't have it up here, but if you look at that picture, go look at Jordan Klepper, you'll think you're looking at Devin, my son. And I think there's a relationship somewhere right there. So what about you? Do you have anything embarrassing in your family history? Anything scandalous? Oh, yeah. You found out what? That you were German and now you're not? Oh my gosh. What'd that do to you? Well, that's good. You're who you are, aren't you? Yeah. We all have stories like that. Disappointments or surprises. We all come from imperfect people who made imperfect choices. And sometimes we worry that those stories will define us, but that the mistakes of our ancestors or even our own mistakes would disqualify us from God's plan. But here's what I want us to remember. There's good news in Jesus' messy lineage. The good news is that God's grace is bigger than our worst mistakes. The women in Jesus' genealogy were defined by the society in which they lived as foreigners, prostitutes, seducers, but God defined them as worthy and valuable, essential. God's story includes everyone. God sees beyond our labels and our categories. It includes different races, different genders, different religions. All have a place in God's story. We love Rachel Held Evans. She said the presence of Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and lastly Mary in Jesus' genealogy reminds us that God is in the business of working through the unexpected, the marginalized, and the courageous. Folks, when we truly understand the radical nature of Jesus' family tree, we will see and hear in it a call to justice. It's not just a story that has an interesting footnote. Look at these women. It's not just a story told to make us, and we do feel good. We feel better about ourselves. Those of us who might have some scandal in our family history. The story makes us feel good about ourselves, but that's not the reason for the story, only reason. The next reason for the story is, yes, I feel okay. God loves me with all this stuff in my past. No, maybe the story is this. Now then, I am called to do what these ladies did. I am called to go out and be inclusive. God includes me. Maybe I now am called to promote justice in this community and to be just as inclusive and to reimagine that our world can be inclusive. So as we leave here today, let's not just find comfort in being accepted, despite our messy histories. This story comes with a holy obligation to extend their same radical inclusion and justice to everybody else. Social justice is one of the 4 core values of the venues. We have the opportunity to see social justice in the story of Jesus and to make that our story too. So let's find courage in knowing that we come from a long line of holy troublemakers who dare to imagine and to create a more just world.